Now, I may be one of the most inconsistent booktubers, but if there's one thing I can promise you is that the wrap-up will come. The sun will rise. Sara will stop procrastinating long enough to set up her camera and talk about the book she's read recently, or rather, the last 6 months. Also, if you follow me on Goodreads, I am so sorry for flooding your homepage via hurricane updates. I have not been very good with staying up to date with my Goodreads lately. But get this, who would have thought that being less rigid with my tracking and not correlating the number of books I read with my productivity would actually reduce my anxiety and be great for my mental health? I'm gonna have to call my doctor up because I think I can just quit my meds. Yeah, don't follow my advice. Today we'll be talking about the 33 books I read between the months of March and August. Basically, everything I read over spring and summer. I'm going to try to be succinct and not go on too many tangents, but sometimes I just need a rant. The first book I read in March, I actually learned about from y'all. I love to get y'all's recommendations. The Secret Book and Scone Society by Ellery Adams. In this novel, we follow Nora, a bookstore owner, who can recommend the perfect book to alleviate any ailment in your life. Sound familiar? Sound kind of like what you're looking for is in the library? Yeah, a very similar situation going on in here. Except Nora's method only works if a patron has eaten a comfort scone from the local bakery. Why? I'm just putting it out there. I think there's something more going on with these scones because I'm not buying the whole. The ingredients are tailored to each person's emotional needs. Seems to me like a roundabout way to circumvent the real ingredients in these scones, but I digress. I think we can agree that these scones offer a form of edible therapy. Take that as you wish. While Nora is out and about one day, she meets a visiting businessman, clearly in need of her help. Unfortunately for Nora, well actually, this man, he's got a fixed appointment with a train and death himself. Yeah, he's later found dead on the track. Ouch. Over the novel, we follow Nora and a group of women, each troubled in their own way, as they investigate the businessman's demise. I gave this book 3 stars. A big element in here is the camaraderie that develops between these women who, despite their fear of getting hurt, desperately need that comfort and companionship from each other, which I thought was a lovely sentiment, as no matter what stage you are in life, you can always benefit from friendship. However, these characters did not read like real people. They weren't even caricatures. They just lacked the intricacies of a believable character. Their dialogue felt unnatural, not like how a normal conversation between 2 people would play out. I enjoyed the bookish references, all the shenanigans that went on, but not enough to continue with the series. It has taken me, how many years have I been on YouTube? Too long to read this book. I could blame myself for that, but I would rather blame you. No, but everyone who has claimed this to be their favorite romance of all time, like, how do I cope with all that hype? Oh, I know, my good friend Avoidance. I have physically owned this book for at least 3 years, as evident by the very outdated cover. How many cover iterations have there been of this by now? All while thinking that this can't possibly be as good as everyone's been saying it is. This is a good lesson. Sometimes in life, we are wrong. That is okay. I think as a society, we need more intellectual humility. The funny thing is, a week after I read this, a friend of mine read it as well. There was no correspondence between us beforehand. Christina Lauren has brainwashed me because why is it that if any other guy did what the male MC in here did, I'm just gonna chuck these, but that's not a good idea. Kidding, I'd never do that. Me in a fight? Sorry you missed. Yeah, but when Elliot does it, it's okay. On one level, I think that lends credence to having developed characters and a complex story, but also the rational part of my brain knows that I can't in good faith give this 5 stars, so I'm giving it 4.5. This was a very compelling read where nothing around me matters except this fictional world with a narrative that is just as addictive, yet fundamentally opposing with counteracting elements that I was rooting for, even though I knew that they both couldn't simultaneously exist. A great read, especially for book lovers, as the 2 MCs develop a friendship over books, and then later that develops into something more. All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. This is a thriller in the loosest possible sense. Most of the book is a slow burn mystery where it seemed to be the author's goal to use as many words as possible to get to the point. There's a way to write a thriller that uses beautiful prose but is not verbose, and this was not it. In my opinion, Lisa Jewell is often a great example of that. In the style of a typical cliche thriller protagonist, protagonist. We follow a sleep-deprived woman obsessed with an idea and uncovering what she believes to be true. However, Isabel has always had sleep issues and has been known to sleepwalk from time to time, often doing things and going places she has no recollection of. So when her 1-year-old disappears in the middle of the night, she will do anything to find him, even if that means teaming up with a true crime podcaster and suppressing that growing knot in her stomach that she may have been the one who harmed her son. I gave this 3 stars. The fact that this has a higher rating than A Flicker in the Dark, that is literally not comprehending in here. And I thought that I was being generous. There has to be a glitch in the system or something. The repetition of descriptors in here became laborious to read. Again, there needs to be a point to a more verbose writing style rather than just hitting a word count. Granted, I did quite like our female MC in here. She was a particularly fascinating character to analyze, and I do appreciate the rhetoric about the damage social pressures and expectations can have on a person, especially mothers. But ultimately, I didn't find this to be all that impactful, and I'm sure will become one of those thrillers that in a few months' time that I know I've read, but can't recall anything about. Not at all saying that because it took me way longer than it should have to remember anything about that book. This next novel, The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins, I thoroughly enjoyed. I flew through it. This novel takes place 10 years after the death of Ruby, the wealthiest and most enigmatic woman in North Carolina. Ruby's notoriety dates back to early childhood when what was supposed to be a fun family picnic resulted in her temporary kidnapping. Since then, she's been widowed 4 times. Their deaths, yeah, I guess kind of look suspicious, but why would this woman, with everything, keep murdering her husbands? Like, doesn't really make sense. In the aftermath of Ruby's death, and much to her relatives' dismay, Ruby's estate has since been collecting dust since its new owner, Camden, Ruby's adopted son, has chosen to pursue a more small-town lifestyle with his wife, Jules. However, when Camden returns to check back on Ashby House and confront the relatives still residing there, or squatting there, a more proper term, questions about Ruby's past arise, all while Jules becomes increasingly more determined to claim what was left for her and her husband. I gave this 4 stars. The story is told through various methods. We have Camden and Jules' POV, letters from Ruby's POV, news articles, which really enriched the story. There are definitely some similarities between the Heiress and the 7 husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Each has a wealthy woman recounting the mysterious deaths of her many husbands, but the writing and tone is very different in here. Not necessarily in a bad way, but the Heiress reads more like a gothic southern thriller, while Evelyn Hugo leans more Hollywood glam and historical/contemporary fiction. The notion of how rich people can get away with anything was a bit overdone. When certain things are glaringly so obvious, subtlety can be a great resource. Still, if you're itching for a good dysfunctional family with rich people drama, look no further. So, as we all know, I have been reading the brutal Birthright series by Sophie Lark at what some may consider a painstakingly slow pace, but I would argue that that is actually the best way to consume this series because they are all literally the same. And despite that, I eat it up every time, as long as you acknowledge the problematic rhetoric inherent in any mafia romance series. But in this one, Broken Vow, our female MC Riona is a lawyer, and our male MC Raylan, he's a, how do I put this? A military cowboy? I don't know, who becomes the bodyguard of Riona, because although she's not really involved with her family's business, the mafia doesn't care about that, so there's kind of a hit on her. Yeah, not fun stuff. I gave this 4 stars. Riona, I loved. I am a simp for a strong-willed, career-driven character. Raylan, on the other hand, he's whatever. Giddy-up cowboy, I guess. The balance of equal parts romance and action makes the series so addicting. This next book I read on the Kindle, Emergency Skin by N.K. Jemisin, is a science fiction short story that basically follows an explorer sent on a mission to the very Earth that his ancestors and other select individuals fled centuries ago. His mission is to retrieve something on Earth that is of utmost importance and brave the allegedly destroyed atmosphere and devolved humans left behind. I gave this 4.25 stars. The book is primarily a commentary on an array of topics, delivered in a way that is at times shocking and slightly absurd, but at other points humorous. This whole book is an allegory for how oppressive systems strip individuals of autonomy and independent thought. This book has a very inventive narrative style that takes a bit of getting used to, especially if you're not expecting it, but still, I would definitely recommend this if you want a short story that also makes a statement, one that will punch you in the face. And I thank it for that. Moving into April, I started the month with The Mother-in-Law by Sally Hepworth, an author I could binge if I were not trying to continuously read a variety of books and genres. Surprise, surprise, I really enjoyed it. This novel is part domestic thriller, part psychological thriller. Through alternating past and present timelines, we follow the perspectives of Lucy and her mother-in-law. Well, late mother-in-law. After Diana's passing, further investigation suggests that foul play may have been involved with her death, which really isn't all that surprising considering that Diana wasn't known to be the easiest person to get along with, as evidenced by her relationship with Lucy, who would love nothing more than to have a close-knit relationship with Diana, but can never seem to live up to her expectations. Oh my god. Diana? Are you with us? The lighting keeps going in and out, so ignore that. We're just gonna have to roll with it. Let's get back to Murder. I gave this 4.25 stars. This novel revolves around the dynamic relationship between in-laws, which was particularly intriguing as that is a relationship you are neither born into nor choose, but by choosing your spouse, you become linked to their family, and your relationship with them could vary greatly from your spouse or how your partner interacts with them. We also examine a few other relationships, such as Diana and her husband. They're the type of couple who you kind of side-eye thinking, how did these two get together exactly? That type of couple who seem to have completely different personalities. We all know a couple like that. This was a fantastic character study with characters you feel for and others you hate and simultaneously love. The pacing at the end was a bit rushed, also near the end. To not spoil anything, I'm going to be vague, but one of the characters in here gave a huge piece of advice to another character, and they were acting as if they were the arbiter of this information when literally a few pages ago they just gained that insight themselves. It was just odd and felt unrealistic. Mind you, this was all completely unironic. Whether you have a mother-in-law, are a mother-in-law, at the very least, know of a mother-in-law, like I'm assuming most people do, this was a very intriguing dynamic to examine, all within the confines of a gripping thriller. Bunny by Mona Awad. One of the most divisive novels. If there's a whole subcategory for weird fiction, this for sure would be considered a classic. The things that go on in this book, they are comically absurd, so I don't think you'll be scarred by this book if that is a concern of yours, unless maybe you're vegan or vegetarian. I literally cannot elaborate without going into spoilers. For those that don't already know, this novel takes place at a university where there's this group of girls who call themselves the Bunnies. Are they a cult? Are they just a group of codependent individuals who practice seances and such? The Bunnies are part of a MFA writing program with our protagonist who, over the book, kind of gets drawn into their furry little orbit. Mona Awad certainly exceeds in doing something a bit more experimental, but also doesn't take itself too seriously. That gets more perplexing as you read, while touching on topics such as identity, female friendship, the desire for belonging. I gave this 5 stars. This is not your typical book. This is an art piece that serves to redefine dark academia. If you can lean into the absurdity and embrace the bizarre, this will certainly be a read you will never forget. I am so happy to come on here and say that I have finally finished The Hobbit. The best part is it only took me a mere 7 months. Like, crazy, right? My edition here is this beautiful illustrated edition, which is why I really wanted to physically read it. But then every time I would pick up this book, I started hating myself and my life choices a bit more. That's not cute. We try to practice self-care on this channel. So I switched to the audiobook, and let me tell you, the audiobook is amazing. You could tell that the publisher spent some serious coin in producing it. There's music, singing. It felt like I was in a Disney film. I did read along with the audiobook so that I could see the pictures and get my money's worth. I have not done that since American history in 5th grade. Oh my god, weird memory unlocked there. Our history class was literally just us reading along with the narration of the textbook. And that's public school for ya. No, honestly, the school system I went to was great. Besides middle school, ew. The Hobbit is an adventure fantasy and is the prequel to The Lord of the Rings. Set in the universe of Middle-earth, we follow Bilbo, right? Yep, that's right. A quiet, comfort-loving hobbit living his cozy little life in his hobbit hole when suddenly his life is upended by the wizard Gandalf and a band of 13 dwarves as they enlist him as a burglar to help them recover their ancestral home and treasure that is currently being guarded by the dragon Smaug. Please don't hate me, but I gave this 3 stars. It wasn't bad, but despite this being an adventure story, I was bored. The writing was dry. I thought I would enjoy enjoy Bilbo's cottagecore coated lifestyle. I just could not get invested in the story though. The highlight of this book for me was probably when we were introduced to Gollum, as he is such an iconic character that is recognized beyond just the Lord of the Rings franchise. Trying to find a picture of him. Cutie, where'd you go? Isn't he so cute? Like, that's what nightmares are made of. This was news to me. Apparently this book has been adapted into not 1, not 2, but 3 films. So I watched the first, and around the 2-hour mark, I remember thinking, wow, this movie is either going to be really long or they're really gonna have to like rush the ending or something. Yeah, no, apparently there are 2 more movies, which I have yet to watch. 1 film's okay. 3 films, however, too much of a commitment. Also, the movie was like 3 hours long. If a story cannot be told in an hour and a half, you need to get the chopping block out. We need to cut some stuff out. And that is my hot take coming from a literal film student. The foreshadowing of this book was also so obvious. And maybe that's partially because this was originally written for children, but the suspense was as non-existent as Middle-earth itself. I know a lot of people hold this book close to their heart. Maybe for some, there's this nostalgia element. I just couldn't get into it. House of Glass by Sara. It has been so long since a thriller has made me feel this way. The writing, the storyline, absolutely remarkable. In this novel, we follow Stella Hudson, a best interest attorney appointed to represent Rose Barclay in her parents' bitter divorce. Contrary to what the title implies, the Barclays house is actually devoid of all things glass. A house of plastic, you could say. And although Stella feels this kinship with Rose, who has been suffering from traumatic mutism ever since her past nanny's death, Stella can't seem to shake the feeling that Rose, the person she is meant to protect, this little girl fascinated with sharp objects, may be the one who actually she needs protection from. I already know that when I think back on 2025, this will be a standout thriller of the year. Needless to say, I gave this 5 stars. This was such an immersive story with a plethora of characters and palpable tension. There was also a small book of the month reference in here, which I just thought was kind of cute, considering that this was a book of the month selection. And from my understanding, authors don't know that their book will be a book of the month pick until it is finished and it is about to get published. Next is another book, a thick book, thank you very much, with hair in it apparently. Oh my god, I've just pulled like 4 strands of hair out of this book. Okay, that's not concerning. Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. I have been avoiding because people kept saying that it wasn't as great as the first, and I didn't want to in any way taint my love of Fourth Wing. So I guess I'm part of the small percentage that actually enjoyed Iron Flame. Not as much as Fourth Wing, but still gave it 5 stars. I still loved it. I was still absolutely feral once I got over that initial trepidation of starting a over 600-page book. A war college, dragons, found family. What is there not to love? I do have Onyx Storm, and I am very much looking forward to it once I get in the mood. The Couple in 5B by Lisa Ungner. One day, Lisa Ungner is gonna write something that really blows my socks off. That is yet to happen. The Couple in 5B was decent. It reminded me a lot of Lock Every Door, where there's this creepy gothic apartment building our character moves into, and the building is kind of a character in itself. In this book, however, we follow Rosie, the newest resident of the Windermere, as she sets out to research and immortalize the building's rather sordid history. But slight problem, she keeps seeing dead people. Hate that when that happens. And it also seems that anyone who starts digging into and talking about the past ends up dead. I gave this 3.25 stars. It's not something I would outright dissuade you from reading. I enjoyed it enough, but at points, the characters do things that make me want to strangle them from their blatant incompetence in recognizing red flags. And when an author repeatedly uses the excuse of gaslighting to justify women's behavior, I honestly take offense because you're just making women look dumb. I liked the overall story, but the execution was not exactly great. Maybe if you're really into paranormal, this will be up your alley. Maybe. Probably not. Next, I picked up Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. After reading Good Material by Dolly Alderton last year, I've been craving something similar that would bring me that same joy, and I knew that this followed a comedian as well. This is classified as a romance, so it's definitely more of a rom-com than Good Material. I did enjoy it, not quite as much. I gave this 4.25 stars. The relationship we follow basically serves to subvert the rule our protagonist has coined as the Danny Horst caste rule, which is basically the belief that a non-famous man can date a famous woman, but if the roles were reversed, that'd be a different story. I loved our protagonist in here. She is this sarcastic, relatable heroine whose main source of life is working and writing for this SNL adjacent sketch comedy show. The formatting in here is a bit different. A third of this book is told solely through emails, which I personally liked. My inner Reddit lurker is showing here, but it felt like reading something that we shouldn't be reading, like someone's personal emails. The last part of this novel takes place during the pandemic, and in this case, I thought it detracted from the story as the resolution only occurred because of the pandemic, and it was just not as satisfying as it could have been if the catalyst for the makeup was not some uncontrollable force. Still, this was really cute. I would recommend. Let's talk about these next two together. Tales from the Cafe and Before Your Memory Fades, books 2 and 3 from the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series. I really don't have much to say individually about these two books because they are one and the same. No, that can't be right. Oh, sorry, my bad. This one takes place in a different coffee shop where patrons can travel back in time than the coffee shop that is in books 1 and 2 where the patrons can travel back in time. Yeah, big difference. As for my ratings, I gave the second installment 4 stars and the third 3 stars. By the third installment, oh my god, the number of times I had to read the rules for this cafe had me wanting a lobotomy. But even someone with half a brain cell could remember these rules just from the sheer frequency in which they are repeated. The series really shines in crafting these episodic stories that all intricately weave together. I also enjoyed how the third posed these philosophical questions throughout about a hypothetical scenario of the world ending. And not gonna lie, that ending brought a few tears to my eyes, but I cannot continue with the series. Please reprimand me if I buy another one of these books because I fear for my sanity if I do. Staying with the theme of series, Heartstopper, Volume 3 by Alice Osman, the vacation installment, because every series needs to change up the setting for one book. I gave this installment 4.5 stars. In this volume, Charlie and Nick take a school trip to Paris. The series is really just as cute as it seems. I appreciated how the author highlights some of the realities of mental health struggles. The book didn't really dive that deep into it. It was more like, yeah, this is what teens struggle with, which can definitely be relatable, but is arguably not that all impactful unless we dive into the root causes or coping mechanisms associated with those issues and resources available for those struggling, which maybe is a bit much to ask for in a YA book. My favorite character in the series, it's not even a main character, it's Charlie's sister Tori. She is such a mood, and I will be patiently waiting for a spin-off centered around her. The Stranger in the Mirror by Liv Constantine. Our main POV in this thriller is from Addison, who 2 years earlier was found wandering along the street with no memory or recollection of who she is or where she's from. Fast forward to the present, Addison is now happily engaged, still with no recollection of her past, until she meets a man claiming to be her husband with a child at home waiting for her mother to return. So obviously there's this big moral dilemma of whether Addison should continue with this life she's built in which she feels safe and seen in, or should she honor the family she once had. And when a kid's involved, that just muddies the water even more. You do have to suspend your disbelief some, but I thought this was a solid take on the amnesia trope, which is definitely a trope that has been done a lot. I gave it 4 stars. While reading the novel, you think it's going down one path, but then it goes down a completely different one that was so much better. Kind of unhinged, but it was great. I am going to briefly mention these next 4 books as I filmed a whole reading vlog for them, which you can watch if you want a more in-depth discussion, my hot takes, all of that's over there. The Powerless series by Lauren Roberts. You either love or hate the series. Maybe this is because I'm not a huge fantasy reader, but I thought it was a romp. My ratings range from 4 to 4.5 stars, so check the video out if you want. No pressure, but reading vlogs don't perform very well, so it would make me happy. Whatever you want to do is cool. Heading into June, I started the month with Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugget. I love a good socially awkward character story, especially when that is paired with dark humor, because I kind of feel seen. We start off with our protagonist Sally quite literally taking her dad out with the trash, because that's what he told her to do after he dies. Whether he meant that as a joke and not actual instructions to follow is neither really here nor there. She was just doing what she was told to do.
I'm just a girl
Now, her actions may not have been exactly legal, but can you really blame her? Sally, for the most part, grew up isolated at home with only her psychiatrist father for company, causing her to struggle to connect with and understand people. The unwanted attention Sally gains from her unusual handling of the deceased leads to revelations of secrets from Sally's early childhood, forcing her to grapple with the truth and everything she was raised to believe. I gave this 4 stars. Sally is a character who is easy to root for, despite her misgivings, as she is ultimately a survivor. I also found her honesty refreshing. She doesn't perform social niceties. Loved her deadpan humor as well. This novel takes place in Ireland, and I don't know the pharmaceutical regulations over there, but that doesn't negate the fact that these characters were popping narcotics, literally narcotics. Sorry. Tablets as a means for avoidance. These characters were popping pills like it was candy. One could argue that that was the point Liz Nugget was trying to make, but she didn't write in that way. Instead, treating blatant narcotic use as something normal and everyday. Even if I were to take off my mental health advocate hat, this coping mechanism ultimately detracts from the story by suppressing the character's true feelings to be inevitably examined at a later date, causing the story to feel like it's dragging at parts. The ending was also a bit of a letdown. There was no final hurrah for all of the tension and suspense built up over the novel to cultivate into this impactful reveal, which a book doesn't always need to have, but when a novel reads like a thriller and the ending is more of like a psychological study, there's this sense of dissonance. Still, this was a great exploration into the impacts of generational trauma. I enjoyed it, and I would recommend it if it intrigues you. It was around this time, deep in the throes of June, when apparently my mental health had gotten too mundane, you know. I needed something to really get me in the feels. So I picked up a man called Uva? I'm going to go with Ove, but if any Swedes want to correct me on my pronunciation, feel free. This was its equal parts heart-wrenching and comical. Centered around Ove, one of the grumpiest protagonists you will ever have the pleasure of reading from. The novel kicks off after Ove is recently forced into retirement, leading him to now spend his days patrolling the neighborhood, enforcing rules, and keeping to himself by all means necessary, which soon proves harder said than done when a young family moves in next door, flattens his mailbox, and disrupts his plans for the day. Ove is such a distinct character that you will undoubtedly quickly form some opinion or judgment about him. But then as we slowly learn more about his past and see him start to connect with and touch his neighbors' lives, your opinion and respect for him will grow immensely. This novel is also about the transformations we go through and how different events in life affect and mold us into who we are today. I've seen this book on lists that supposedly feature the saddest books of all time. Yes, this was sad at parts, but it wasn't overbearing, as those sections were also balanced by a sense of warmth and, at times, comedy. And what works so well in this book is that the humor never undercuts the sadness, it coexists with it. Readers can laugh at parts while also still feeling the weight of Ove's loneliness and loss. Now, this next novel, The Fury by Alex Michaelides. My fellow Americans may notice that my edition is different. This is the UK cover, which in my very subjective but correct opinion is miles better than the US version. It's very creepy. The colors do not do it for me. You know that uncanny valley feeling you get when looking at AI generated art? The US cover brings me that same sense of unease. Not that it's AI generated, but you get what I mean. This is an And Then There Were None akin novel that follows former movie star Lana and 5 of her closest friends on a vacation getaway to her private Greek island. Yes, she is that rich. The I own my own island rich. Now, money can solve a lot of problems, but as we soon learn, preventing your friends from murdering each other is not one of them. I gave this 4 stars. In all of Alex Michaelides' books, there are always various Greek mythology references sprinkled throughout, which is a fun little Easter egg. The story is narrated by Elliot, one of the friends Lana invites. I should warn you, Elliot is absurdly self-righteous. I found it quite comical. The delusional sense of grandeur that some people possess is crazy. And from a storytelling perspective, Elliot's characterization feeds into him being an unreliable narrator. This is more of a slow-paced thriller, but I enjoyed the story and thought the ending was fun. I didn't predict it, so there's that. Transitioning now to July. Coincidentally, my mom and friend Emily recently read The Woman by Kristen Hanna and both really enjoyed it. So obviously, I had to pick up The Nightingale. I do want to get to The Woman eventually, but this is one of the 20 books I want to read in 2025. This is a historical fiction novel that follows two sisters during the German occupation of France during World War II and the different ways in which they confront the challenges of war and their pursuit of survival. I gave this 4.5 stars. Kristen Hanna did a phenomenal job at crafting these distinct characters that embody the courage and resilience of women during wartime, whether that's simply going to the market every day in hopes of finding any morsel of food to feed your family, or through a more active rebellion by joining the French resistance. This novel also emphasizes the often overlooked contributions of women during this period. Some parts were a bit overly descriptive and drawn out for my taste. Oh my god, that mountain journey could not have been longer. I'm sure the characters felt the same way. All in all, a very hard-hitting novel. To feed my very healthy and normal parasocial relationship with Lisa Jewell, I picked up Watching You, which is a multiple POV storyline, each with some form of stalking going on. It's almost like Lisa Jewell is trying to send me a message. I'm kidding. It was a bit. Stalking is certainly not something you would expect in the seemingly idyllic neighborhood of Melville Heights, home to doctors, lawyers, including the new headmaster, Thomas Fitzgerald, who you will soon become quite accustomed to, as each POV somehow ties back to him. Over the novel, we follow the events leading up to a murder in a lucky resident's own home, and how such a gruesome event could have occurred. This cannot compare to my love of some of Lisa Jewell's other works, but it was still a very entertaining read. I gave it 4 stars. The POVs in here were an interesting choice. They were not who I expected us to follow, which I found to be a pleasant surprise in itself, as you're not really sure why you're following them until the very end when everything comes together. The main mystery I predicted practically from the very beginning, but the side plots and narrative kept me from really caring all that much. There are numerous elements in this book to keep you intrigued: teenage drama, marital discourse, morally questionable characters. A very solid thriller. Next up is The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. This YA mystery is centered around a documentary being filmed called The Disappearance of Rachel Price. Until, didn't see this one coming, Rachel Price reappears. The documenters are all like, oh my god, I thought she was dead. We're all gonna be rich. Belle Price and her father are equally as shocked. The last time Belle saw her mom, she was like 3, so she's practically grown up her whole life without a mother. But following Rachel's return, Belle starts to notice some inconsistencies in her story. Certain things aren't adding up, and Belle is determined to get to the bottom of it. I gave this novel 4.5 stars. The only thing I didn't like about this novel was our female MC. I think Holly Jackson was going for the misunderstood teen with past trauma, but that still does not give that character a free pass to treat anyone like the scum on the bottom of her shoe. And she spends so much time having this cynical, brash attitude that once she eventually accepts reality, her change in demeanor just came across as fake. There is a side plot of romance in here, like any true, typical YA murder mystery, but the choices that Holly Jackson made in crafting the male love interest was refreshing. Now, personally, t-shirts that say pugs, not drugs on them don't really do it for me, but teach their own. I liked the sentiment behind his character. I also appreciated how this book doesn't string you along with misdirections. Everything is intentional and builds up to the bigger mystery. The visceral anger you feel for the characters at the end, oh my god. As someone in a creative field, I loved the documentary aspects in here. You should also note that the book doesn't really pick up until about 50 pages in, which, okay, is kind of expected. What I was not expecting was Holly Jackson to full on acknowledge that in a self-referential way, which I couldn't decide if I found cringy or funny. Probably a bit of both, but I'll leave that up to y'all. Moving on to Jane and Dan at the End of the World, which I gave 5 stars. This was everything that it was trying to be and so much more than what I thought it was going to be. This is a type of novel that you read when you want to have a good time, but when you also want something that touches on deeper themes through using levity to make them more digestible. In this book, we follow Jane and Dan, a married couple celebrating their anniversary at the upscale, prestigious La Fin du Monde, when suddenly a hostage situation breaks out, which certainly was not what Jane had plans for the evening. She just wanted to ask her husband for a divorce. Like, that shouldn't be that hard, right? But what is even more surprising is that the criminals claim to be, you can't make this stuff up, an environmentalist group. There's more, where every action they make seems to come straight out of the pages of Jane's own novel. I flew through this book. It was such a joy to read. The banter between the characters was great. There was tension woven into the comedic undertone. This novel actually reminds me a lot of the movie The Menu. Tone-wise, complete opposites, but both take place at a secluded high-end restaurant and uses humor or satire to poke fun at the high-end dining experience, where it's more about presentation and prestige than actually feeding people, where what you order is more plate than food. I can't wait to read more from Colleen Oakley because I just loved this so much. I started August, unfortunately, with Good Bad Girl by Alice Feeney. I saw the negative reviews about this book. I did not believe said reviews because I've enjoyed this author's previous works. Like, Alice Feeney, do you need help? Are you okay? Because this thriller felt like a completely different author wrote it. This book basically revolves around two mysteries that take place on the same day, 20 years apart. One involving a baby stolen from a stroller, and the other following a murder in a local care home. We follow how these events interconnect with each other and the three women affected by them. I gave this 2 stars. The meandering plot moves along at such a slow pace with no indication of where we're going that by the time everything comes together, I couldn't care less. A way to effectively break up the story so that it doesn't feel so monotone is by having different narrative voices, which you will not find in this book. The POVs are copy and paste in tone, writing style. There was no mind-bending plot or tension-filled atmosphere that I expect from an Alice Feeney. At its core, this is about complicated mother-daughter bonds, which could be interesting if that conversation were not so surface level. This can honestly be a skip. Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. For those that don't already know, this is a part of the Brown Sisters standalone romance series. I've previously read and enjoyed Actor Age Eve Brown, and since have been wanting to go back and read the first. Was this anything revolutionary? No, but it was cute. I enjoyed it. We follow Chloe after a near-death experience leads her to re-examine her current life and create a list that will supposedly help her step out of her shell and liven up her life. This includes moving into a new apartment complex where she meets Red, the new handyman who might be the perfect person to help her with her list and subsequently get a life. So the synopsis on the back of the book describes Chloe as a computer geek, and I'm sorry, not that there's anything wrong with being a computer geek, a so-called computer geek, but I started this expecting Chloe to be like some chronically nose in her laptop coder. I would bet that Chloe has a healthier relationship with her computer than most people. That sounds kind of weird, but I know I am literally always on my laptop. Yes, it is a problem, but a lot of the world revolves around you interacting with technology. So if Chloe is a computer geek, then what am I? I gave this 4 stars. This seems to have great representation of the struggles of having chronic pain. And although I can't fully understand the pain Chloe endures on a daily basis, I do resonate with the feeling of having a medical condition that you have little to no control over how/when it flares up. If I ever come on here looking drier than the Sahara Desert, you can thank eczema for that. Though I recently started Dupixent and honestly has changed my life. Almost fainted a couple times from the pain, but small price to pay. Yeah, woo! This is a novel about 2 people inadvertently helping each other live a better life, and I thought it was very sweet. Following that book, I picked up 2 Truths and a Lie by Meg Mitchell-Moore. We start off with Sherry and her daughter Katie, the newcomers in town, having just escaped from their previous life. More on that later. Sherry soon befriends another mother, Rebecca, member of the notorious Mom Squad, and one of our other POVs. While Sherry's past remains a bit of a mystery, Rebecca understands the struggles of starting over, as just a few years prior, her husband passed away, leaving her struggling to adapt to her new life. We also follow Rebecca's older daughter, Alexa, as she navigates life before college and grapples with discovering a secret that probably should have stayed hidden. This secret would have stayed hidden if it were anyone else. So let's refer to Rebecca's daughter as no better name than Nosy Nelly. I gave this book 3.5 stars. I wished we got more of the Mom Squad because I lived for their catty dynamic, and the little pieces of them we got were pretty funny, mostly because they contradicted each other, like gossip tends to do, where story starts off as one thing, but as it snowballs and spreads, it becomes an abstract depiction of the truth. I'm referring to the Mom Squad as one entity because besides Rebecca, I could not tell you who else was in the squad. There was like 12 other women in this group, so it was impossible to keep track of everyone. Also, Nosy Nelly, Rebecca's daughter, kind of infuriated me. Again, with characters using their own trauma to continuously justify their behavior. I need a reason for a character's actions besides having been through trauma because, newsflash, we've all been there. And of course, your feelings and emotions are valid, but that doesn't mean you have to take that out on every other individual. I am getting so tired of these characters. Every single person in here could have benefited from therapy, I swear. It doesn't sound like it, but I did enjoy the novel for the most part. There was definitely room for improvement. You thought there would be no nonfiction? No. I have to get one in at least, if not for any other reason than to feel like I'm bettering myself. The House of Mother by Sherry Frankie is a memoir I've been extremely interested in reading. When the whole Ruby Frankie expose originally went down, I was tapped into that story as if watching those videos was my job. With social media still being a relatively new phenomenon in terms of the entirety of human existence, we are only starting to see the repercussions, such as with family vlogging, where these children are growing up having a camera constantly in their face to record every second of their adolescence to be commodified and broadcast to millions without their consent, because when you're that young, you don't fully understand what you are agreeing to. And like with the Ruby Frankie situation, where the parents put social media fame above the well-being of their children, it's not just unfathomable, but deeply sad. Sherry is the eldest daughter of Ruby Frankie, and in this memoir tells her story of what it was like growing up on the channel 8 Passengers under the control of, and I quote, a narcissist mother. I gave this 5 stars. It was fantastic. I really want to commend Sherry for respecting her siblings' privacy and telling only her story and what she went through. Besides her oldest brother, Chad, she doesn't refer to any of her other siblings by name, which some might see as overkill, but doing this gives them back the agency and control over their own lives, the very thing they once never had. This was such a poignant memoir that explores manipulation, generational trauma, and the dark side of social media. I highly recommend. Lastly, I wrapped up August with Day by Michael Cunningham. I have been on the hunt for a novel that really captures the essence of the COVID-19 pandemic and doesn't exploit that period as a cop-out plot point like some novels do. So when I heard that this book was a great snapshot of that period, and apparently this author also won a Pulitzer Prize, all things considered, this seems like a good contender. How do I put this? It was all right. I gave it 3.75 stars. This was very literary. The writing was very flowery. Don't get me wrong, the prose, absolutely magnificent. The way the author used words to depict emotions so vividly was stunning. However, this book was very, very, very character focused. These characters sure felt like real people, but if I wanted to learn about real people, I'd just go outside. There's a reason I'm this pale, okay? What am I trying to imply with that? Let me rewind. I gotta workshop that. I would have liked a bit more plot, and the lack of plot was not due to a lack of mess, because there was sure plenty of that. In this novel, we basically follow a family living in an apartment over 3 different years, structured all within a day. So the morning took place before the pandemic, midday was 2020, and then the afternoon was post-pandemic. A very unique structure. I have to applaud the author for that. It's also clever how that formatting emphasizes how the pandemic, for most people, was a pivotal moment where life is forever segmented into pre and post pandemic. On a side note, my edition here is actually look at that, an ARC. No, I did not receive this in the mail or anything like that. I actually found this at a used bookstore, not knowing that I was buying an ARC, and then later that day, I realized that I inadvertently bought an ARC for a Pulitzer Prize winning author. I feel like this should have cost more, but I am very happy that it didn't. It just feels cool to have this in my collection. All right, so those were all the books I read over the past 6 months. As always, if you have read any of these, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. I am going to go take a nap now because I am exhausted. So I think that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It really does help me, my channel out a lot. You can also comment, interact, subscribe, all that fun YouTube stuff. I'd really appreciate it. I hope you all are having a fantastic day, a fantastic week, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.